They dragged her through the mud like a dead animal. Blood dripped from her torn dress, mixing with the filth beneath her knees. The crowd screamed for her death, not because she'd committed a crime, but because she existed. Because she was born without the one thing that defined humanity in Duskfall, a wolf spirit. Tonight, Leora Vance would be thrown into the Abyss prison to rot. But what nobody knew, not even Leora herself, was that something far darker than death was waiting for her down there. Something that would make them all regret the day they cast her aside. If you want to see how a rejected nobody becomes the most powerful queen in the kingdom, stay until the end. And don't forget to like this video and comment what city you're watching from. The stone street tore into Leora's knees as the guards yanked her forward by the chains. She didn't try to stand anymore. There was no point. Every time she managed to get her feet under her, someone in the crowd threw a rock, or spat, or kicked, and down she went again. Monster! Abomination! She doesn't even have a shadow. The voices blurred together into a single roar of hatred. Leora kept her eyes on the ground, watching her own blood trail behind her like a broken red thread. She'd learned years ago not to look up. Eye contact only made it worse. Move faster, defect. The guard's boot connected with her ribs. Not hard enough to break anything. They'd been told to deliver her alive, but enough to steal her breath. She gasped, stumbled, kept moving. The marketplace of Duskfall spread out around her in the dying light of evening. Merchant stalls lined both sides of the street, their colorful awnings flapping in the wind. The smell of roasted meat and fresh bread mixed with the stench of rotting vegetables and human waste. On any other day, this would have been a place of commerce and gossip. Today, it was an execution ground. And Leora was the show. I always knew there was something wrong with her, a woman's voice cut through the noise. Leora recognized it immediately. Mira Thorne, the baker's wife. They'd grown up on the same street. Even as a child, she had those empty eyes, like looking into a corpse. My daughter said she tried to talk to her once, another voice chimed in. Said it was like talking to a wall. No warmth, no soul. Leora wanted to scream at them. She wanted to tell them that she'd tried, that she'd spent every waking moment of her life trying to be normal, to fit in. But how could you fake something that everyone else seemed to have naturally? How could you pretend to be whole when you were born missing a piece of yourself? In Duskfall, everyone was born with a wolf spirit, a second soul that lived inside them, gave them strength, connected them to the pack. It was what made them human, what made them real. When children were born, the entire family would gather at midnight on the seventh day. The baby would be laid on the stone altar in the temple, and the priests would chant the old words. If the ritual worked, and it always worked, the child's eyes would flash gold just for a moment, and everyone would know the wolf had bonded. Leora's eyes had stayed brown. The priests had tried 3 times. 3 different nights, 3 different rituals, each one more desperate than the last. Her mother had wept. Her father had raged, and baby Leora had simply stared at the ceiling, silent and unresponsive. No wolf, no connection, no worth. She's cursed, someone shouted from the crowd. She'll bring ruin to the kingdom. The king should have killed her years ago. The king, Leora's jaw tightened. King Aldrich Vance, her own father, hadn't just allowed this. He'd ordered it. She'd stood in his throne room 3 days ago, surrounded by the royal court, while he looked down at her with the same expression you'd give a stain on your boot. You're a blight on this family, he'd said, his voice echoing off the stone walls. An embarrassment, a mistake that should have been corrected at birth. Leora had stood there, shaking but silent. What could she say? He was right, she was a mistake. I have tolerated your existence out of a misplaced sense of mercy, Aldrich continued, his fingers drumming against the armrest of his throne. Each tap echoed like a death knell. But that mercy ends today. You will be taken to the Abyss prison and left there until you rot. Maybe in death, you'll finally be useful, as a warning to others. The court had erupted in applause. Lords and ladies in their fine silks and jewels, clapping like they were at a theater performance. Like her life, her death was entertainment. Her own brother, Marcus, had smiled. That cruel, satisfied smile that had haunted her childhood. He'd been the worst of them, always finding new ways to remind her that she was less than nothing. When they were children, he'd lock her in dark closets for hours, telling her that's where monsters belonged. When they got older, he'd spread rumors about her, said she'd tried to seduce him, said she practiced dark magic, said she killed small animals for fun. None of it was true. But truth didn't matter when everyone already believed the worst about you. And her mother, Queen Alara, hadn't even looked at her. She'd stared at the wall behind Aldrich's head, her face blank, as if Leora had already ceased to exist, as if her daughter was already dead and buried. Maybe in her mother's mind she had been dead for years. That was 3 days ago. Since then, Leora had been kept in the dungeon beneath the castle, given just enough water to keep her alive. No food, no light, just cold stone and the sound of rats scratching in the dark. And now this, the final humiliation. A public march through the city so everyone could see what happened to defects. The crowd pressed closer as the guards dragged her toward the northern gate. Leora could feel their hatred like a physical weight, pressing down on her chest until she couldn't breathe. Hands reached out to touch her, to push her, to tear at her dress. Someone yanked her hair so hard that tears sprang to her eyes. "Please," she whispered, though she didn't know who she was talking to. The guards didn't care. The crowd wanted her dead. And if there were any gods watching, they'd abandoned her a long time ago. A child broke free from his mother's grip and ran up to Leora, his face twisted with curiosity and cruelty. He couldn't have been more than 7 years old. "Is it true you don't have a wolf?" he asked, tilting his head like a bird studying an insect. Leora didn't answer. "My dad says you're not even human. He says you're a hollow shell, like a bug wearing a person's skin." "Get back, boy!" one of the guards barked, but the kid had already reached out and poked Leora's shoulder with a stick. "She feels real," the boy said, sounding disappointed. His mother snatched him back, her face flushed with embarrassment and fear. "Don't touch it, Liam. You don't know what diseases it carries." "It." Not her. Not even she. Just it. Leora felt something crack inside her chest. Not her ribs. Those were already bruised. Something deeper. Something that had been holding her together for 23 years finally gave way, and she realized with startling clarity that she didn't care anymore. Let them hate her. Let them call her a monster. What did it matter? In a few hours, she'd be dead anyway. The thought should have terrified her. Instead, it felt like relief. The northern gate loomed ahead, its iron bars twisted into the shape of snarling wolves. Beyond it lay the wasteland, a stretch of dead earth where nothing grew and nothing lived. And beyond that, carved into the side of a black mountain, was the Abyss prison. Nobody came back from the Abyss. The guards stopped at the gate, waiting while the mechanism groaned and the bars slowly lifted. The crowd fell silent, as if even they understood the finality of what was about to happen. Leora lifted her head for the first time since the march began. The wasteland stretched out before her, gray and endless under the bruised sky. In the distance, she could see the mountain, a jagged black tooth rising out of the earth. And near its base, barely visible in the fading light, was a hole, the entrance to the prison. "Any last words, defect?" one of the guards asked. He sounded almost bored. Leora turned to look at him. He was young, maybe 25, with the kind of face that would have been handsome if not for the cruelty in his eyes. She'd seen him around the castle before. He'd always made a point of spitting whenever she walked by. "No," she said quietly. He grunted, clearly disappointed that she hadn't begged or cried. That's what they all wanted, wasn't it? A show, proof that she knew her place. The other guard, older with a scar running down the side of his face, leaned in close. His breath smelled like sour wine and decay. "You know what lives in that prison?" he whispered, his lips almost touching her ear. "Things that used to be people. Things that ate each other to survive. You won't last a day." Leora met his eyes and saw the truth there. He wasn't trying to scare her. He was telling her a fact, like commenting on the weather. "Good," she said. That seemed to throw him. He pulled back, frowning, as if he'd expected her to break down and beg for mercy. But Leora was done breaking. She'd spent her entire life trying to be smaller, quieter, less offensive, trying to prove that even without a wolf she deserved to exist. And where had it gotten her? Chained, beaten, thrown away like garbage. So no, she wouldn't beg, she wouldn't cry, she wouldn't give them the satisfaction. The guards shoved her through the gate. The moment she crossed the threshold, the temperature dropped. It was subtle at first, just a slight chill in the air, but with each step deeper into the wasteland, it grew colder. By the time the gate clanged shut behind her, Leora's breath was fogging in front of her face. The chains around her wrists were long enough that she could walk, but heavy enough that she had to hunch forward to keep from falling. Her torn dress provided almost no protection against the wind that whipped across the dead earth, cutting through the thin fabric like knives made of ice. Behind her, she could hear the crowd starting to disperse. The show was over. They'd go home to their warm houses and hot meals, and by tomorrow, they'd forget she ever existed. Maybe they'd tell their children about the defective princess who got what she deserved. A cautionary tale, a monster story to keep the little ones in line. Be good, or you'll end up like the Hollow Girl. Leora kept walking. The wasteland was worse than she'd imagined. There was nothing here, no plants, no animals, no sound except the wind howling across the empty land. Just cracked gray earth stretching out in every direction, and that black mountain growing larger with each step. The ground beneath her feet was hard as iron, split with deep crevices that she had to navigate carefully. One wrong step and she'd twist an ankle, maybe break a leg. Then she really would die out here, slowly and alone, staring at that unchanging gray sky. How long would it take to reach the prison? An hour? 2? Would she even make it that far, or would she collapse halfway and die of exposure? Part of her hoped for the latter. At least that would be quick. But her body, stubborn and stupid, kept moving. One foot in front of the other, left, right, left, right. Her legs burned, her lungs ached from the cold air, her hands were numb, the chains cutting into her wrists with every swing. Still, she walked. The sun sank lower, painting the sky in shades of rust and ash. Shadows stretched across the wasteland like grasping fingers, and Leora felt the cold settle into her bones. She was shivering now, her teeth chattering so hard it hurt her jaw. Just a little farther, she told herself. Just make it to the prison. Then you can rest. Rest. What a gentle word for death. She thought about her life as she walked. 23 years of being invisible, of being less than nothing. She'd had no friends, no allies, no one who looked at her and saw a person instead of a mistake. There was a time, she must have been 6 or 7, when she'd still believed things could get better. She'd tried so hard to make them love her. She'd learned to read and write faster than Marcus, thinking maybe intelligence could make up for what she lacked. She'd memorized poetry and history and the names of every noble family in Duskfall. Her father had looked at her test scores and shrugged. A clever dog is still just a dog. She tried to help her mother in the gardens, thinking maybe they could bond over something simple. But Alara had stiffened every time Leora came near, as if her daughter's mere presence was painful. "Don't touch those flowers," she'd snapped once. "Everything you touch withers." That wasn't true, of course. The flowers grew just fine. But truth didn't matter. By the time Leora was 10, she'd stopped trying. She'd learned to make herself scarce, to move through the castle like a ghost. She ate her meals alone in her room. She avoided public gatherings. She spoke only when spoken to, and even then, as little as possible. It hadn't helped. If anything, her silence made them hate her more. They called her sullen, ungrateful, cold. Said she thought she was too good for them. Said she was plotting something. She couldn't win. There was no right way to be a person when people had already decided you weren't one. The mountain was close now, close enough that she could see the individual stones that made up its face, each one sharp and black as obsidian. And there, carved into the base, was the entrance to the Abyss prison. It wasn't a door. It was just a hole, a ragged opening in the rock that seemed to swallow the light around it. No guards, no bars, nothing to keep prisoners in, because nothing could survive long enough to escape. Leora stopped at the entrance, staring into the darkness. She couldn't see anything beyond the first few feet, just an endless black that seemed to pulse with its own sick heartbeat. For the first time since the march began, real fear twisted in her gut. I don't want to die in there, she thought. Not in the dark, not alone. But there was nowhere else to go. Behind her, the wasteland stretched back to the kingdom that had rejected her. Ahead, only darkness. She took a breath, one last taste of open air, one last moment of seeing the sky, and stepped inside. The temperature plummeted. Leora gasped as the cold hit her like a physical blow, stealing the air from her lungs. It wasn't natural cold, wasn't the chill of winter or wind. This was something else, something wrong, something that felt like death itself had breath and was exhaling directly into her face. The darkness closed around her, so complete that she couldn't see her own hands in front of her face. She shuffled forward slowly, arms outstretched, the chains around her wrists dragging against stone with a sound that echoed endlessly through the tunnel. The tunnel sloped downward, steeply. Leora's foot slipped on the smooth rock and she went down hard, her knees slamming into the ground. Pain shot up her legs, but she bit back the cry. Sound felt dangerous here, like it might wake something better left sleeping. She crawled forward on her hands and knees, the chains scraping and rattling with every movement. The stone beneath her palms was slick with something she couldn't identify. Water? Blood? She didn't want to know. Down, down, down. How deep did this go? Minutes passed. Or maybe hours. Time felt strange here, stretched and compressed at the same time. Leora's sense of reality started to blur at the edges. Was she moving, or was the tunnel moving around her? Was she even still alive, or had she died at the entrance and this was some kind of hell? Her hands were bleeding now, torn open on the sharp stone. She couldn't see the blood, but she could feel it, warm and slick between her fingers, the only warm thing in this frozen hell. And then she heard it. Breathing. Not her own. This was deeper, slower, like the breath of something massive, something that had been sleeping for a very long time. Leora froze, her heart hammering against her ribs so hard she thought it might break through. The breathing continued, echoing through the tunnel from somewhere below. In, out, steady and rhythmic, like a sleeping beast. There's something down here, she thought, her mind screaming at her to turn back. Something alive. She should go back. Should turn around and take her chances with the wasteland. Freezing to death had to be better than whatever was making that sound. But when she looked over her shoulder, the entrance was gone. Just more darkness, stretching in every direction. The tunnel must have curved without her noticing, or maybe the darkness was playing tricks on her eyes. No way out, a voice whispered in her head. It might have been her own. It might have been something else. Only forward. So Leora kept crawling, because what else could she do? The breathing grew louder as she descended, until it filled her ears and drowned out even the sound of her own heartbeat. And beneath it, she could hear something else. A wet, sliding sound, like something massive dragging itself across stone. Like scales against rock. Terror locked her muscles. She couldn't move, couldn't breathe, could only listen as whatever it was came closer, closer, closer. And then light, faint and blue, barely brighter than a dying ember. But after so long in the dark, it felt like staring into the sun. Leora squeezed her eyes shut, tears streaming down her face. When she finally managed to open them again, squinting against the glow, she saw the source. Mushrooms. They grew along the walls of the tunnel in thick clusters, each one glowing with that strange blue light. They looked wrong somehow, too bright, too blue, pulsing with their own rhythm like tiny beating hearts. And by their glow, Leora could see where she was. The tunnel had opened into a massive cavern. The ceiling was so high she couldn't see it, lost in shadows that the mushroom light couldn't reach. The walls were lined with those glowing fungi, creating a twilight landscape of rock and eerie luminescence. And everywhere, scattered across the floor like broken dolls, like discarded trash, like the remnants of forgotten lives, were bones, human bones, thousands of them. Skulls stared up at her with empty sockets. Rib cages lay cracked and hollow, some still bearing scraps of rotted cloth. Finger bones were scattered like seeds, an arm here, a leg there, a spine curved against the wall like a sleeping snake. This was the Abyss prison. This was where Duskfall threw the people it wanted to forget. Leora stood slowly, her legs shaking so badly she could barely support her own weight. The chains around her wrists suddenly felt absurd. What was the point of restraints in a place like this? She looked around for the source of the breathing, but the cavern appeared empty except for the bones and the mushrooms and that horrible blue light. Had she imagined it? No, there it was again. That slow, steady breathing coming from deeper in the cavern, from the darkness beyond the mushroom light. Against every instinct screaming at her to run, Leora picked her way through the bones, heading toward the sound. She didn't know why. Maybe because it was the only thing in this place that was alive. Maybe because after a lifetime of isolation, even a monster seemed like company. Maybe because she'd already accepted that she was going to die here, and curiosity was the only thing she had left. The bones crunched under her feet. Some of them were old, worn smooth by time and whatever grew in this darkness. Others were newer, still bearing traces of flesh and hair. Leora tried not to look too closely at those. The breathing led her to the far wall of the cavern, where the stone had been carved into the shape of a massive door. It must have been 30 feet tall, covered in strange symbols that hurt to look at. Not words, at least not in any language she recognized. They seemed to writhe and shift in the blue light, and the longer she stared at them, the more her head ached. And sitting in front of the door, propped up against the stone like discarded trash, was a man. He wasn't moving. His head hung forward, his long dark hair covering his face. His clothes were torn and blood-stained, hanging off his massive frame in tatters that barely qualified as clothing anymore. But his chest rose and fell with each breath, alive. Somehow, impossibly, alive. Leora stopped a few feet away, suddenly aware of how vulnerable she was. This man was huge, easily 7 feet tall, with shoulders like a bull and arms thick with muscle, even in their current wasted state. Even unconscious and clearly injured, he looked dangerous. He looked like he could snap her neck with one hand and not even notice. "Hello?" Her voice came out as barely a whisper, swallowed almost immediately by the vast emptiness of the cavern. The man didn't respond. She took a step closer, her chains rattling. "Can you hear me?" Nothing. Leora glanced back at the tunnel she'd come from, wondering if she should just leave him here. He was probably dying anyway. What could she do? She had no medical knowledge, no supplies, nothing but the torn dress on her back and chains on her wrists. But even as she thought it, her feet carried her forward. She couldn't explain it, couldn't justify it. But something pulled her toward him, some instinct she didn't understand. Maybe it was because he was the first living thing she'd seen that hadn't immediately tried to hurt her. Maybe it was because in this place of death, even a dying man felt like hope. She knelt beside him, careful not to get too close, and reached out with a trembling hand to push the hair back from his face. The moment her fingers touched his skin, his hand shot up and caught her wrist in a grip like iron. Leora screamed and tried to jerk away, but he held her fast. His head lifted, and she found herself staring into eyes that glowed like molten gold in the mushroom light. Not human eyes. Not wolf eyes either. Something else entirely. Something ancient and angry and aware. "Who?" His voice was rough, like he hadn't used it in a long time, like speaking caused him physical pain. "Who are you?" "Nobody," Leora gasped, still trying to pull free. His grip was crushing her wrist, grinding the bones together. "I'm nobody. Please let go. Please." Those golden eyes narrowed, studying her face with an intensity that made her skin crawl. She could see more of him now, the sharp angles of his face, the dried blood crusted around his mouth, the way his skin seemed to shimmer in the blue light. Beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. He had scars. So many scars. They covered his arms, his chest, where his shirt had torn away, disappearing under the fabric. Some were old, silvered with age. Others were fresh, still red and angry. "You're lying," he said flatly. "What?" "Nobody is nobody." He coughed, and blood speckled his lips. "You have a name. Use it." "Leora," she whispered. "Leora Vance." His grip loosened slightly, and something flickered across his face. Surprise? Recognition? "The princess," he said. It wasn't a question. "You know who I am?" "Everyone knows who you are." He coughed again, harder this time, and more blood appeared. "The cursed princess. The hollow girl. The kingdom's shame. Take your pick. They have plenty of names for you." "And who are you?" Leora demanded, anger cutting through her fear. She hated the way he said it. Hollow girl. Like she was a thing instead of a person. The man smiled, and it was not a kind expression. It was the smile of a predator who'd just spotted prey. Someone who's been waiting a very long time for you to show up. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means," he said slowly, his eyes never leaving hers, "that your father made a deal. A long time ago. And you, princess, are payment." Leora's blood went cold. "What are you talking about?" "Ask him yourself." The man's smile widened, showing teeth that seemed too sharp. "Oh, wait, you can't. Because he threw you away like garbage." "I don't understand." "You will." His eyes started to drift shut. "Soon enough, you will." "Wait," Leora said, grabbing his shoulder. "What deal? What did my father do?" But the man's head had already slumped forward again, unconscious, or dead. Leora checked his pulse with shaking fingers. Still there, faint and erratic, skipping beats like a failing drum. But there. He was dying. She sat back on her heels, trying to process what he'd said. A deal, payment, her father. It didn't make sense. Aldrich hated her. He'd always hated her. Why would he make a deal involving her? Unless that was the point. What if she'd been born this way on purpose? What if the missing wolf, the empty space inside her, wasn't an accident but a curse? A price paid for something? Leora looked at the massive sealed door behind the dying man, at the symbols that writhed and twisted, at the darkness that seemed to seep from the cracks around the edges. What was behind that door? And what did it have to do with her? She looked back at the man. His breathing was getting shallower, more labored. He probably had hours at most, maybe less. She should leave him, should explore the cavern, try to find water or a way out, or at least somewhere less exposed to die. But instead, Leora found herself looking at his wounds. There, on his side, hidden beneath the tatters of his shirt. A deep gash, still seeping blood. That was the worst of it. If she could stop the bleeding, maybe he'd have a chance. With what? She had nothing. No bandages, no medicine, no clean water. Her dress. Leora grabbed the hem of her already torn dress and ripped off a long strip of fabric. It wasn't clean. It was covered in mud and blood, and who knew what else. But it was better than nothing. She leaned forward, trying to ease the man onto his side so she could reach the wound. He was heavy. Dead weight. It took all her strength just to shift him a few inches. Finally, she managed to expose the gash. It was deep, deep enough that she could see white beneath the red. Bone? She didn't know. Didn't want to know. She pressed the fabric against the wound, applying pressure. Blood immediately soaked through, warm and sticky. "Come on," she muttered. "Don't die. Not yet. Not before you tell me what the hell is going on." Minutes passed. The bleeding slowed but didn't stop. Leora's arms were shaking with the effort of maintaining pressure. Her own wounds throbbed in sympathy. This was stupid. She was going to die here anyway. Why waste her last hours trying to save a stranger who'd probably just kill her if he woke up? But she kept pressing, because maybe, just maybe, she could do one good thing before the end. Because for 23 years, everyone had told her she was useless, worthless, a waste of space. And maybe if she could save this one life, it would mean something. It would mean she wasn't nothing. The man's breathing steadied slightly. The bleeding slowed to a trickle. Leora tied the makeshift bandage tight around his torso using strips torn from her dress. She was nearly naked now, her dress reduced to little more than scraps held together by hope. But she didn't care. She was too tired to care. She slumped against the wall beside him, exhausted. Her hands were crusted with blood, his and hers mixed together. Her whole body ached. The cold had seeped so deep into her bones that she couldn't remember what warmth felt like. She should stay awake, should keep watch in case something else lived down here. But her eyes were so heavy. Just for a moment, she thought. I'll just close my eyes for a moment. Darkness took her. When Leora woke, she wasn't alone. The man was awake, those golden eyes fixed on her with an expression she couldn't read. "You saved me," he said. It sounded like an accusation. "Don't sound so grateful," Leora muttered, sitting up. Every muscle in her body screamed in protest. "Why?" "I don't know." And she didn't. It had been stupid, pointless. But she'd done it anyway. The man studied her for a long moment. Then slowly he extended his hand. "Draven," he said. "My name is Draven Kor." Leora stared at the offered hand, at the scars that covered it, at the claws, actual claws, where his fingernails should have been. "You're the Alpha King," she whispered. Draven's smile was sharp as broken glass. Was, past tense. Your father made sure of that. And suddenly, everything clicked into place. The sealed door, the symbols, the prison. This wasn't just any prison. This was a tomb, and her father had buried his greatest enemy alive. Leora's hand stayed frozen in the air, not quite touching Draven's outstretched palm. The Alpha King. The monster from the stories her brother used to tell her to keep her awake at night. The warrior who'd killed 1,000 men in a single battle. the beast who drank the blood of his enemies, and her father had buried him alive. "You're supposed to be dead," she said. Draven's laugh was bitter. "I am dead, just taking longer than expected to finish the job. How long have you been down here?" "What year is it?" 2347. Draven's face went very still. 3 years then, give or take." 3 years? Leora looked at the wound she'd bandaged, at the blood still seeping through the fabric. "That's not a 3-year-old injury." "No." Draven pulled his hand back, letting it drop to his side. "That's from 2 days ago, when I tried to break through the door." Leora glanced at the massive sealed entrance behind them. The symbols carved into it seemed to pulse in the blue mushroom light, alive with something that made her stomach turn. "What's behind it?" "Freedom, death. Depends on your perspective." Draven shifted, wincing as the movement pulled at his wound. "Your father sealed me in here with a blood curse. That door won't open unless—" He stopped. "Unless what?" "Doesn't matter. It's not opening." Leora felt anger flare in her chest. "You said my father made a deal, that I was payment. What does that mean?" Draven studied her for a long moment, those golden eyes seeing too much. "You really don't know anything, do you? They kept you in the dark about all of it." "All of what?" "Why, you were born wrong." The words hit her like a slap. Born wrong. That's what everyone had always said, but hearing it from him, from someone who seemed to actually know something, made it feel more real somehow. "Tell me," Leora demanded. "Why should I?" "Because I saved your life." "I didn't ask you to." "Too bad. You're alive anyway. Now talk." Draven's mouth twitched, almost like he wanted to smile. "You've got fire in you. Didn't expect that from the Hollow Girl." "Stop calling me that." "It's what you are, isn't it? No wolf, no soul, just—" Leora grabbed the front of his torn shirt, surprising both of them. "I may not have a wolf, but I'm still a person. And I'm done letting people treat me like I'm not." For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Draven laughed, a real laugh this time, rough and painful sounding, but genuine. "All right," he said. "I'll tell you, but you're not going to like it." "I haven't liked anything about my life so far. Try me." Draven leaned back against the stone door, his face pale. 23 years ago, your father was losing a war. My army had pushed into Duskfall's territory, taken half his kingdom. He was desperate. So he made a deal with you. Not with me. With something older. Something that lives in the spaces between the world you see and the world that is. Draven's eyes went distant, remembering. There are forces in this world that don't care about human politics or wolf packs. They care about balance, about payment, about ancient laws that existed before your kingdom or mine ever did. Leora's skin prickled. What kind of forces? Of the kind that can grant any wish, for a price. Draven coughed, and blood appeared at the corner of his mouth again. Your father wished for victory, for the power to defeat me and secure his throne for generations. And the force, let's call it the Weaver, agreed. What was the price? His firstborn child, specifically her wolf. The cavern seemed to tilt sideways. Leora sat down hard on the stone floor. The Weaver took your wolf before you were even born, Draven continued, ripped it right out of your soul while you were still in the womb. And with it, it took something from me too. What? My ability to die. Draven's smile was horrible. Turns out, souls are connected in funny ways. The Weaver bound your missing wolf to my life force. As long as you exist without it, I can't die. No matter how much I want to, no matter what wounds I take, I just keep healing, keep suffering, keep existing. Leora felt sick. That's why my father buried you alive, smart girl. He couldn't kill me, the curse prevented it, but he could make sure I suffered, so he lured me here under the pretense of peace talks, ambushed me, and sealed me behind that door with magic older than this kingdom. Draven's hands clenched into fists. I've been rotting in this hole for 3 years, trying everything to break free. But the door won't open. Not unless... Unless what? Leora pressed. You keep not finishing that sentence. Draven looked at her, and there was something like pity in his eyes. Unless you die. Or get your wolf back. Either way, the curse breaks. The door opens. I'm free. The implications crashed over Leora like a wave. So when my father threw me in here, he was tying up loose ends, getting rid of his embarrassing daughter and killing me at the same time. Once you die, the curse ends. The door opens. And I'll be weak enough that the next thing down here will finish what your father started. What else is down here? You heard the breathing on your way in, didn't you? The sliding sounds? Leora nodded, her mouth dry. There's something that lives in the deep tunnels, something old. I've heard it moving for 3 years but never seen it, and I don't want to. Draven's voice dropped. Whatever it is, it's patient. It's been waiting, and once the door opens, it won't matter if I'm immortal or not. It'll tear me apart slowly enough that I'll wish I could die. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of it all pressing down on Leora's chest. So I'm a trap, she said finally. My whole life, my whole existence, I was just bait. Pretty much. And if I die, you die. Eventually, but you'll go first so you won't have to watch. Leora laughed, and it came out wrong, too high, too sharp. That's almost considerate. I'm a generous king. Former king. Touché. Leora looked down at her hands. They were still covered in dried blood, hers and Draven's mixed together. I saved you, she said, even though killing you might have been smarter, might have broken the curse myself. Might have, Draven agreed. Why didn't you? I don't know. She really didn't. Every logical part of her brain said she should let him die, should take her chances with whatever came next. But something deeper, something she couldn't name, had made her act. Maybe I'm tired of being the monster everyone thinks I am. Maybe I wanted to prove I could save something instead of destroying it. You didn't destroy anything. Your father did. Doesn't matter. Everyone blames me anyway. Draven was quiet for a moment. Then he said, You know what the worst part is? They're going to get away with it. Your father, your brother, all of them. They'll tell everyone you died in the abyss, a fitting end for a cursed princess. No one will question it. No one will care. The anger that had been simmering in Leora's chest since the march through the city suddenly erupted into something white-hot and consuming. No, she said. No? I'm not dying down here, and neither are you. Draven raised an eyebrow. You got a plan, princess? Not yet. Leora stood up, her legs still shaky but her resolve hardening. But I'm done being helpless. I'm done being the victim. If my father wanted me dead, he should have killed me himself instead of throwing me away like garbage. Poetic, but that doesn't solve our immediate problem. Draven gestured weakly at the sealed door. We're still trapped. You have no wolf, no power, no way out, and I'm too weak to break through the curse. Then we find another way. There is no other way. I've had 3 years to look. You've been dying for 3 years. I'm fresh. Leora started walking around the perimeter of the cavern, studying the walls. There has to be something, a crack in the stone, another tunnel, something. You're wasting your time. Good. It's my time to waste. She heard Draven shift behind her, probably watching her with that expression that was half amusement, half pity. Let him watch. She was done caring what people thought. The cavern was massive, the walls disappearing into shadow beyond the reach of the mushroom light. Leora walked slowly, running her hands over the stone, feeling for any change in texture or temperature. Nothing. She kept going. Behind her, Draven coughed. It sounded wet. Bad. How long can you survive without food or water? She called back. Longer than you. That's not an answer. I don't know. Like I said, I can't die. But I can get weak. Weak enough that I can't move, can't think, just exist in agony until something changes. His voice was getting fainter. It's already starting. Leora's hands touched something different. A seam in the rock, barely visible in the dim light. She traced it with her fingers. It ran vertically for about 6 feet, then curved horizontal. A door. Not like the massive sealed entrance behind them. Something smaller, rougher, hidden. Draven, she called. There's something here. She heard him try to stand, heard the curse he bit out as his legs gave out. Can't make it over there. Leora pressed against the stone, trying to find a way to open it. There was no handle, no obvious mechanism, just smooth rock that felt slightly cooler than the surrounding stone. She pushed. Nothing. She tried sliding it sideways. Nothing. Growing frustrated, she slammed her fist against it. The stone cracked. Not broke, just cracked, a thin line spreading from where she'd hit it. And from that crack, light spilled out. Not the blue glow of the mushrooms, something golden and warm. "What did you do?" Draven's voice was sharp with alarm. "I don't know." Leora hit the stone again, harder. Another crack appeared. More light. "Stop." "Why?" "Because you don't know what's behind there. And staying here is working out so well." Leora hit it a third time, and the stone shattered inward, revealing a narrow passage beyond. The golden light poured out, so bright after the dimness of the cavern that Leora had to shield her eyes. And with the light came warmth, real warmth, the first she'd felt since entering the wasteland. "That's not possible," Draven said. He'd managed to drag himself closer, his face pale and sweating. "That wall was solid. I checked it 100 times. "Maybe it was solid for you." Leora stared at the passage. "Maybe it needed me to open it. Or maybe," Draven said slowly, "whatever's behind that door wanted you to open it." They looked at each other. "I'm going in," Leora said. "That's insane." "You have a better idea," Draven grimaced. "Help me up." "You can barely stand." "Then I'll crawl. I'm not letting you go in there alone." "Why not? You said yourself if I die, you go free eventually." "I also said I can't die. Which means if something in there kills you, I'll be stuck listening to it digest your corpse for the next 3 years. Draven held out his hand. "Help me up." Leora took his hand and pulled. He was heavy, his weight nearly dragging her down, but between the two of them they managed to get him upright. He leaned heavily against her shoulder, his breathing labored. "This is stupid," he muttered. "Yeah. We're probably going to die." "Probably. And even if we don't, we're still trapped down here with no food or water and something hunting us in the dark." "Your point?" Draven laughed, pained but genuine. "No point, just making sure we're on the same page." They stepped through the broken wall together. The passage beyond was narrow, forcing them to move single file. Leora went first, with Draven's hand on her shoulder for support. The golden light seemed to have no source. It just was, emanating from the walls themselves. "Where does this go?" Leora whispered. "No idea. It wasn't here before." "How can a passage just appear?" "The same way a girl with no wolf can break stone with her bare hands." Draven's voice was tight with pain. "None of this makes sense. We're past sense now." The passage sloped upward, which should have been encouraging except that it seemed to go on forever. Up and up and up, the golden light growing brighter with each step. Leora's legs burned, her lungs ached. Behind her she could hear Draven's breathing getting worse, more ragged. "How much farther?" he gasped. "I don't know. If I pass out, you're not passing out. If I do, leave me. Keep going." "No." "Leora." "I said no." She stopped, turning to look at him. His face was gray, his lips tinged blue. He was dying. Curse or no curse, his body was giving up. "You don't get to die on me now, not after telling me my whole life is a lie. You're going to live long enough to help me fix this." "Can't fix what's already broken. Watch me." She grabbed his arm and slung it over her shoulders, taking more of his weight. He tried to protest, but she ignored him and kept moving. The passage opened suddenly into a chamber. It was small, barely 10 feet across, and perfectly circular. The walls were smooth and carved with more of those symbols that hurt to look at. But in the center of the room, floating about chest height above the floor, was a sphere of pure golden light. It pulsed like a heartbeat. "What is that?" Leora breathed. Draven had gone very still. "That's not possible." "What is it?" "A soul fragment. A piece of a wolf spirit that's been separated from its host." His voice was full of something like awe and horror mixed together. "But this size. This is a complete wolf. Whole and intact." Leora's heart stopped. "My wolf? Has to be. The Weaver must have stored it here instead of destroying it." Draven's grip on her shoulder tightened. "Don't touch it." "Why not?" "Because you don't know what will happen. The curse, the binding. If you reclaim your wolf the wrong way, it could kill us both. Could kill everyone in the kingdom above. Or it could break the curse and set us free. Or that." Leora stared at the golden sphere, her wolf, The piece of herself that had been missing for 23 years, right there, right in front of her. All she had to do was reach out and take it. Your father will know the moment you bond with it, Draven said quietly. The curse will break. The magical signature will be unmistakable. He'll send every guard in the kingdom to make sure you die before you can become a threat. Then let him come. Leora, I'm tired of being afraid. She stepped forward, away from Draven's support. He stumbled but caught himself against the wall. I'm tired of being nothing. If I'm going to die in this hole, I'm going to die whole. That's not... But Leora was already reaching out. Her fingers touched the golden light. The world exploded. Pain ripped through her body like lightning, burning along every nerve. She tried to scream, but no sound came out. Her vision went white, then black, then white again. And then she felt it. A presence inside her mind, vast and ancient and wild. Not separate from her, but part of her, the missing piece finally clicking into place. Hello, the wolf said. Its voice was her voice, but not older, deeper, full of power that made her bones shake. I've been waiting. Leora tried to respond, but she couldn't form words, couldn't think. The power flooding into her was too much, too fast, like trying to drink from a waterfall. Easy, the wolf said. Breathe. Let me in slowly. I don't know how. Yes, you do. You've always known. They just convinced you that you didn't. And somehow Leora understood. She stopped fighting, stopped trying to control it. Just let the power flow. Let the wolf settle into the space that had been empty for so long. It hurt. It hurt worse than anything she'd ever felt. But it also felt right. The pain faded gradually, replaced by something else. Strength. Awareness. Connection. She could feel everything. The stone beneath her feet. The air moving through the chamber. Draven's labored breathing behind her. The massive presence of the thing that lived in the deep tunnels far below them. She opened her eyes. The chamber was different now, brighter, sharper. She could see details she'd missed before. The way the symbols on the walls formed a pattern, a map of energy flowing through the mountain. The way Draven's curse glowed like a brand across his chest, pulsing in time with her own heartbeat. She looked down at her hands. They were glowing, faint golden light emanating from her skin. Leora? Draven's voice was cautious. Are you still you? She turned to look at him and saw him flinch. My eyes, she said. Her voice sounded different, layered. They're gold now, aren't they? Yes. Good. She walked over to him, and with each step she felt stronger. The exhaustion, the hunger, the cold, all of it faded to background noise. How do I break your curse? You can't. Only the Weaver. How? Draven stared at her, and she saw the moment he realized she wasn't asking permission. Blood. Your blood on the door. It should release the binding. Should? I'm not exactly an expert on ancient curses. Good enough. Leora held out her hand. Can you walk? I think so. He took her hand and she pulled him up. He was still weak, still bleeding, but he managed to stay on his feet. They made their way back through the passage, back into the main cavern. The massive sealed door loomed before them, its symbols writhing. Leora walked up to it and pressed her palm flat against the stone. Wait, Draven said. We need to talk about what happens when that door opens. It opens, we leave. We deal with whatever comes next. It's not that simple. The curse breaking will alert your father. He'll know you're alive. He'll know you have your wolf, and he will come for you with everything he has. Let him. Leora. I'm done hiding. Done being ashamed. Done being the hollow girl. She looked back at him, and her eyes blazed gold in the blue mushroom light. If he wants me dead, he can come kill me himself. But I'm not making it easy. Before Draven could respond, she dragged her palm across a sharp edge of the door, cutting deep. Blood welled up, golden tinged now, and she smeared it across the symbols. The door shuddered. The symbols flared brilliant white, and somewhere far above them, in a castle made of stone and lies, King Aldrich Vance felt his greatest mistake wake up. The door began to open, but the sound that echoed from the deep tunnels, that wet, sliding sound of something massive dragging itself closer, suggested they had more immediate problems than a vengeful king. Something was coming, something that had been waiting 3 years for this exact moment, and it was hungry. The sound grew louder, wet scales dragging across stone, closer with each passing second. Leora's new senses screamed at her to run, but the door was still opening, groaning inward with agonizing slowness. "Move!" Draven gasped, grabbing her arm. "Now!" They stumbled through the widening gap, and Leora caught a glimpse of what was behind them. Something massive, something with too many legs and eyes that reflected the blue mushroom light like mirrors. Something that had been starving in the dark for years. The door slammed shut behind them just as something heavy crashed against it from the other side. The entire mountain shook. "Keep moving," Draven said, though he could barely stand. His face was the color of old parchment. They were in a tunnel now, different from the one Leora had descended through. This one sloped upward, carved smooth by water or time, or something else. Leora could see in the dark now. Everything was painted in shades of silver and gold, clear as daylight. She could hear Draven's heartbeat faltering, could smell the infection spreading through his wound. "You're dying," she said. "Notice that, did you?" The curse broke. "You're mortal again. Lucky me." He stumbled and she caught him. "Go on without me." "No? I'm slowing you down. I don't care." "Your father can wait." She adjusted her grip, taking more of his weight. "I didn't break that curse just to watch you die 5 minutes later." Draven laughed, weak but genuine. "Stubborn. You have no idea." They climbed. The tunnel seemed endless, winding up through the mountain in a slow spiral. Leora's legs burned despite her new strength. Behind them, she could hear the thing from the cavern still trying to break through the door, the sound echoing up through the stone. "What was that thing?" she asked. "A render. Ancient predator from before the kingdoms existed. Your father must have trapped it down there when he sealed me in." Draven coughed, and blood speckled his lips. "Probably hoped it would eat me slowly." "My father is a real piece of work." That's one way to put it. The tunnel opened suddenly into a larger chamber, and Leora stopped dead. Bodies. Dozens of them, scattered across the floor like broken toys. Some were old, reduced to bones and rotted cloth. Others were fresh. Fresh enough that she could still smell the blood. "Other prisoners," Draven said quietly. "The ones who tried to escape." Leora stepped carefully around them, trying not to look at their faces, trying not to imagine herself joining them. One body was that of a woman about her age, her eyes still open, staring at nothing. That could have been me, Leora thought. That should have been me. But it wasn't. Because she'd made a different choice. Because she'd refused to give up. The tunnel continued beyond the chamber of the dead, growing steeper. Leora's breathing was labored now, despite her wolf's strength. Draven was barely conscious, his weight dragging on her shoulder like an anchor. "Almost there," she lied. She had no idea where they were or how much farther they had to go. "You're a terrible liar," Draven mumbled. "Shut up and walk." "Can't. Legs don't work." "Then crawl." Bossy. Despite everything, Leora found herself almost smiling. 3 hours ago, she'd been ready to die. Now she was arguing with a half-dead former king while climbing out of hell. Life was strange. The tunnel finally ended at a wooden door. It was old, the wood gray and splintered, but solid. Leora pushed against it and felt it give slightly. "Wait," Draven said. "Listen." Leora pressed her ear to the door. Voices. Multiple voices, speaking in low tones. "Sealed it properly this time?" "The king said she wouldn't last a day." "And the beast?" "If it didn't kill her, the cold will. Either way, she's not our problem anymore." Guards. They were right outside. Leora looked at Draven. His eyes were closed, his breathing shallow. He wouldn't be any help in a fight. "But I would," her wolf said. The voice in her head was still strange, still new, but it felt right. Natural. "We would. I've never fought anyone. Neither had they before their first time. And they didn't have us." Leora took a breath and kicked the door open. It exploded outward in a shower of splinters. The 2 guards on the other side barely had time to react before Leora was on them. Her body moved without thought, guided by instinct she'd never had access to before. She grabbed the first guard's sword arm and twisted, hearing bone crack. He screamed and dropped the weapon. The second guard drew his sword, but Leora was faster. She ducked under his swing and drove her fist into his stomach. He folded like wet paper. It was over in seconds. Leora stood over the unconscious guards, her hands shaking. Her knuckles were bloody. She'd hit the second guard harder than she'd meant to. Hard enough to feel ribs crack under her fist. Not bad, Draven said from the doorway. He'd managed to prop himself up against the frame. For a beginner. I could have killed them. You could have. You didn't. That's growth. Leora looked at the guards. They were young, probably just following orders. They didn't deserve to die for her father's sins, but they would have killed her without hesitation. Come on, she said, helping Draven out of the tunnel. We need to move before someone realizes they're missing. They were in a storage room of some kind, filled with crates and barrels. A single torch burned in a bracket on the wall, casting dancing shadows. Leora could hear more voices beyond the door at the far end. A lot more voices. Where are we? She asked. Storeroom beneath the northern barracks, if I remember the layout. Draven leaned heavily against a crate. We're still inside the castle grounds. The castle? Leora's heart sank. We came up inside the castle? These mountains are honeycombed with tunnels. The prison connects to everything. Draven's eyes were starting to glaze over. Your father used them during the war. Supply routes, escape paths. Now they're mostly forgotten. Great. So we're trapped in a castle full of people who want me dead. At least it's warm? Not helping. Leora quickly searched the room, looking for anything useful. She found a cloak, too large but better than nothing, and wrapped it around herself. Her dress was in tatters, barely covering her anymore. She also found a water skin and forced Draven to drink. We need to get you to a healer, she said. Can't. The moment we show our faces, the whole castle will come down on us. Then we don't show our faces. Leora grabbed one of the guards' uniforms and started stripping it off the unconscious man. Put this on. I'm 7 feet tall. How is that supposed to? Just do it. While Draven struggled into the too small uniform, Leora tied the guards up with rope she found among the supplies. She gagged them too, making sure they couldn't call for help when they woke up. Now what? Draven asked. The uniform was comically small on him, straining at the shoulders. We just walk out the front gate? No, first we find my brother. That's suicide. Probably. Leora adjusted the cloak to hide her face. But he knows something. Something about why father did all this, and I'm going to find out what. Even if it gets you killed? I was supposed to die yesterday. Everything after this is borrowed time. She opened the door a crack and peered out. A corridor, dimly lit by torches. Empty for the moment, but she could hear footsteps and voices from somewhere above. They slipped out, moving as quietly as possible. Draven was struggling to stay upright, leaving a thin trail of blood behind them. They didn't have much time before someone noticed. The castle was different than Leora remembered, but then again, she'd spent most of her life avoiding it. She'd eaten in her room, studied alone, kept to the empty parts of the fortress where no one would see her and remember she existed. Now, looking at it through her wolf's eyes, she saw things she'd missed before. The way the stones were laid in patterns that focused energy. The subtle markings carved into door frames. This place wasn't just a castle. It was a fortress of old magic, built on something even older. They climbed a narrow servant's staircase, avoiding the main corridors where guards would be posted. Twice they had to duck into alcoves as patrols passed. Once, a servant nearly walked into them, but Leora pressed them both into shadow and the girl passed without noticing. Your brother's chambers are in the eastern wing, Draven whispered. 3rd floor. How do you know that? I spent 3 years planning how I'd kill your entire family when I got out. I memorized the floor plans. That's thorough. Boredom makes you creative. They reached the 3rd floor and found themselves in a hallway lined with portraits. Leora recognized some of them. Ancestors, going back generations. And there, at the end, was a portrait of King Aldrich with his family. Marcus stood beside him, tall and proud. Queen Alara sat in a chair, her expression distant. And standing off to the side, barely in frame, was Leora. Younger, smaller, her face carefully blank. The painter had done something subtle but cruel. Everyone else in the portrait had light in their eyes, a spark of life. Leora's eyes were flat, empty. They made you stand for that? Draven asked. Mother insisted, said it would look worse if I wasn't included. Leora turned away from the portrait. As if anything could make me look worse. For what it's worth, I think you look better now. Leora glanced at him, surprised. Draven's face was serious, no trace of mockery. The portrait made you look like a doll, he continued. Now you look dangerous. I prefer dangerous. Before Leora could respond, a door opened down the hall, and Marcus stepped out. He looked exactly the same, tall, handsome, with their father's sharp features and their mother's golden hair. He was dressed for court, all silk and jewels, the picture of a perfect prince. He froze when he saw them. Leora, his voice was shocked, genuine. You're alive? Disappointed? Marcus's hand went to his sword. How did you... The prison was supposed to kill me? Yeah, I got that part. Leora stepped forward, letting the cloak fall back so he could see her face, see her eyes. Didn't work out the way Father planned. Marcus's face went white. Your eyes. You have a wolf. Turns out I always did. Father just stole it before I was born. That's impossible. Is it? Leora moved closer, and Marcus backed up a step. Tell me, brother, did you know? Did you know what Father did? I don't know what you're talking about. The deal, the weaver, the curse. Leora's voice was rising now, months and years of rage finally finding an outlet. Did you know he sold my soul before I was even born? Did you know he threw me into that prison, hoping I'd die so he could cover up his mistakes? Leora, listen. No, you listen. She grabbed the front of his silk shirt. You made my life hell, you and Father and everyone in this cursed castle. You called me a monster, called me hollow, called me broken, but I was never the monster. You were. Marcus's face twisted. Fear first, then something else, something harder. You're right, he said quietly. Leora blinked. What? I knew. Not everything, but enough. Marcus wasn't backing down anymore. Father told me when I turned 18, about the deal, about your wolf, about what you really were. And you said nothing. What was I supposed to say? That our father damned his own daughter to save his kingdom? That you were walking around with a piece of yourself missing, and it was our fault? Marcus laughed, bitter and harsh. I was 17. I was scared, and Father made it very clear what would happen if I told anyone. So you just... What? Decided to make my life worse, to make sure I knew my place? I thought if I made you hate this place, you'd leave. Run away. Disappear before Father decided you were too much of a liability. Marcus's eyes were wet. I thought I was helping. Helping? Leora's voice cracked. You locked me in closets. You spread lies about me. You made everyone think I was dangerous. Because you were dangerous, are dangerous. Marcus gestured at Draven. You broke out of the Abyss prison. You reclaimed your wolf, and now you're here, in the castle, with the Alpha King himself. Do you have any idea what Father will do when he finds out? I don't care. You should. He'll kill you. He'll kill everyone you've ever spoken to. He'll burn this kingdom to the ground before he lets you threaten his power. Then maybe it's time for a new king. Marcus's laugh was startled. You? You want the throne? I want the truth. I want everyone to know what he did, what you all did. The truth? Marcus shook his head. The truth will get you killed. The nobles, the court, the people, they don't want truth. They want stability, order. And you, sister, are chaos. Maybe chaos is exactly what this kingdom needs. Behind them, Draven made a choked sound. Leora spun to find him collapsed against the wall, blood spreading across his stolen uniform. He's dying, Marcus said, stating the obvious. Then help him. Why would I do that? Because if you don't, I'll tear this castle apart until I find someone who will. Marcus stared at her, and for the first time Leora saw real fear in her brother's eyes. Not fear of their father or the consequences of defiance, fear of her. There's a healer, he said finally, in the East Tower. She's loyal to me, not Father. I can get you there, but after that, you're on your own. Deal. Marcus led them through a maze of servant passages and hidden corridors. The castle was bigger than Leora had realized, layer upon layer of rooms and tunnels that most people never saw. They passed storerooms and guard posts, kitchens and armories, all bustling with activity. No one noticed them. Marcus knew the patterns, knew when to move and when to wait. Finally, they reached a narrow staircase that spiraled up into one of the tower spires. At the top was a single door, and Marcus knocked 3 times in a specific pattern. The door opened a crack, revealing a woman's face. She was old, maybe 60, with gray hair and sharp eyes. "Prince Marcus," she said, her voice careful. "What brings you here at this hour?" "I need your help, Iris." Marcus pushed the door open wider. "And your silence." Iris's eyes widened when she saw Draven's condition. Then they widened further when they fell on Leora. "The princess," she breathed. "They said you were dead." "Not yet." Leora helped Draven into the room. It was small but clean, filled with herbs and medical supplies. "Can you save him?" Iris looked at Draven, assessing. "Depends. How attached to living is he?" "Very," Draven muttered. "Good. I like patients with fight in them." Iris gestured to a bed in the corner. "Get him there. And you," she pointed at Marcus. "Fetch me water, hot and clean." Marcus hesitated. "If Father finds out I helped." "Then you'd better make sure he doesn't find out." Iris was already cutting away Draven's shirt, examining the wound. "Move, boy. He doesn't have much time." Marcus left, and Leora helped maneuver Draven onto the bed. His skin was cold, his breathing shallow. "Stay with me," she said, trying. His hand found hers. "But I think this is it." "No, you don't get to die. Not now." "Bossy, till the end." Iris worked quickly, cleaning the wound and applying some kind of paste that made Draven hiss in pain. "Infection's deep," she muttered. "Should have come to me days ago." "He was in a prison," Leora said. "Clearly." Iris glanced at her. "And you were supposed to be there too, weren't you? The princess without a wolf." "Had a wolf the whole time. Someone just stole it." Iris's hand stilled. "The king." "You knew?" "I suspected. 23 years ago, Aldrich came to me asking about soul bindings and blood curses. I told him it was dark magic, forbidden for good reason. He dismissed me from court the next day." Iris resumed her work. "Your mother gave birth a month later, and when the bonding ceremony failed, I knew what he'd done." "Why didn't you say anything?" "To who? The king who'd already committed the crime? The court that worshipped him?" Iris's voice was bitter. "I've spent 23 years relegated to this tower, healing servants and soldiers, while Aldrich built his perfect kingdom on the bones of his daughter's soul." Marcus returned with the water, and Iris used it to make some kind of tea. She forced it down Draven's throat, ignoring his protests. "This will either save him or kill him faster," she said bluntly. "His body has to decide." They waited. Minutes stretched into an hour. Draven's breathing would slow, then quicken, then slow again. His skin went from cold to burning hot and back again. Leora held his hand the entire time, feeling her wolf pace anxiously inside her mind. "He's strong," Marcus said quietly. He'd stayed sitting in the corner. "Stronger than anyone I've ever seen. He's the Alpha King, former Alpha King. Father broke his kingdom, scattered his pack, made him watch as everything he'd built was destroyed." Marcus looked at Draven with something like respect. "The fact that he survived 3 years in that prison, that's not strength. That's something else." "Stubbornness," Leora said. "Maybe that's the same thing." Dawn light was starting to creep through the tower window when Draven's eyes finally opened. The fever had broken. His breathing was steadier. "Still alive," he croaked. "Told you," Leora said, blinking back tears she hadn't realized were there. "Still? Bossy?" Iris checked his wound and nodded, satisfied. "He'll live. Needs rest, but he'll live." "We don't have time for rest," Marcus said. He was standing by the window, looking down at the courtyard below. "Father knows. Look." Leora joined him. The courtyard was filled with soldiers, hundreds of them, all armed and assembling in formation. "He felt it," Marcus said, "when you reclaimed your wolf. The curse breaking, the magic shifting. He knows you're alive, and he knows you're here." "How long do we have?" "Minutes, maybe less." Marcus turned to face her. "Iris can hide Draven, but you need to run. There's a passage in the cellar that leads outside the walls. I can get you to it." "No." "Leora." "I'm not running." She looked down at the assembled army, at her father's overwhelming force. "I'm done running, done hiding, done being ashamed of existing. Then you'll die. Maybe, but at least I'll die as myself, as something whole. Marcus grabbed her shoulders. Listen to me. Father has 500 soldiers down there. You have a wolf you've had for less than a day. This isn't courage. It's suicide. Then it's suicide. Leora pulled away from him. But I'm not leaving. Not until everyone knows the truth. Not until they understand what he did. The truth doesn't matter if you're dead. It matters to me. Before Marcus could respond, the door burst open. Guards poured in, 10 of them, all armed, and behind them, stepping into the room like he owned it, because he did, was King Aldrich Vance. He looked older than Leora remembered. Gray streaked his hair now, and lines creased his face, but his eyes were the same, cold, calculating, merciless. Well, he said, looking at Leora, this is unexpected. Father, Marcus started. Quiet. Aldrich didn't even glance at him. All his attention was on Leora. You were supposed to die quietly, disappear into legend as a cautionary tale. But here you stand with golden eyes and stolen power. Not stolen. Mine. Always mine. Nothing about you is yours. I gave you life. I let you live for 23 years when I should have ended you at birth. You exist because I allowed it. You exist because the Weaver gave you victory, Leora shot back. Victory paid for with my soul. You're not a king. You're a thief. Aldrich's expression didn't change. Guards, kill her. The soldiers moved forward, swords drawn, and Leora's wolf rose up inside her, golden and furious and ready for war. The first guard never saw her move. She was just suddenly there, inside his guard, her hand on his wrist. She twisted, heard bone crack, took his sword as he fell. The second guard swung at her head. She ducked, drove her stolen blade up through his armor, felt it punch through leather and flesh. He went down screaming. The remaining guards hesitated. Good. Fear would make them sloppy. Leora advanced, her wolf guiding every movement. These men had trained their whole lives to fight, but she had something they didn't: desperation, rage, and a lifetime of pain looking for an outlet. She became a storm of violence. Blood sprayed, men fell, and through it all, Aldrich just watched, his face impassive. When the last guard dropped, Leora turned to face her father, breathing hard. Blood dripped from her stolen sword. Her hands shook with adrenaline. Are you finished? Aldrich asked calmly. Not even close. Good. He smiled, and it was the most terrible thing Leora had ever seen. Because now it's my turn. He changed. His wolf emerged. Not gradually like a normal shift, but explosively, violently. Bones cracked and reformed, fur erupted from skin, and where her father had stood, there was now a monster. He was massive, easily the size of a horse, with fur the color of old steel and eyes that burned red. His teeth were as long as daggers. His claws could rip through stone. This wasn't a normal wolf. This was what the Weaver's power had made him. Something beyond natural, beyond mortal, a king wolf twisted by dark magic and years of cruelty. Leora's wolf whispered in her mind, "Run." But Leora didn't run. She raised her sword and faced the monster her father had become. "Come on then," she said. "Let's finish this." Aldrich lunged, and the world exploded into teeth and claws and the sound of her own screaming. Leora dove sideways as Aldrich's jaws snapped shut where her head had been. His teeth caught the edge of her cloak, tearing it away. She rolled, came up swinging with the sword, but he was already moving, faster than anything that size should be able to move. His claws raked across her shoulder, and pain exploded through her body. She felt her own blood, hot and wet, soaking into what was left of her dress. "You can't win," Aldrich's voice rumbled from the wolf's throat, distorted but still recognizable. "I've had this power for 23 years. You've had yours for hours." He was right. Leora knew it. Her wolf knew it. Every instinct screamed that she was outmatched, but she'd been outmatched her entire life. She feinted left, then went right, slashing at his flank. The blade bit into fur and flesh, drawing blood. Not deep. His hide was too thick, but enough to prove he could be hurt. Aldrich snarled and spun faster than should be possible. His tail whipped around like a club, catching Leora in the ribs. She flew backward, crashed into the wall hard enough to crack stone. Stars exploded across her vision. "Get up," her wolf urged. "Get up or die." Leora pushed herself to her feet, tasting blood. One of her ribs was broken, maybe more than one. Every breath felt like swallowing glass. Aldrich stalked toward her, taking his time now. Did you really think you could challenge me? You, the defective daughter I should have drowned at birth? You didn't have the spine to kill me then, Leora spat. Too afraid of what people would think, so you just made my life hell instead. I made you nothing, which is exactly what you were always meant to be. He lunged again, and this time Leora didn't dodge. She met him head on, dropping the sword and grabbing his jaws with her bare hands as they closed around her. His teeth sank into her palms, grinding against bone, but she held on. Now, her wolf said, trust me, let go. Leora let her wolf surge forward, let the shift take her for the first time. It hurt. Worse than reclaiming her soul, worse than anything. Her bones broke and reformed. Her skin split and regrew. She screamed, but the scream became a howl. When it was over, she stood on 4 legs instead of 2. She was smaller than Aldrich, barely half his size. Her fur was the color of fresh snow with streaks of gold running through it. Not impressive, not intimidating, but fast. She released his jaws and darted between his legs, her teeth finding the soft flesh of his underbelly. She tore, tasted blood, darted away before he could retaliate. Aldrich roared and spun, but she was already behind him, going for his hind legs. Another bite, another spray of blood. He was stronger, but she was faster, and she knew how to fight dirty. 23 years of survival had taught her that. You think speed will save you? Aldrich's massive head swung toward her. I'll just wait until you're tired, then I'll tear you apart slowly. Talk less, fight more, Leora growled back. Her wolf's voice sounded strange in her own ears, higher than his, sharper. She feinted toward his face, then dove low, going for his throat. Almost made it too, but he jerked back at the last second and his paw came down on her back leg. The bone snapped like dry wood. Leora yelped and scrambled away on 3 legs, her vision swimming with pain. The shift back was instinctive. She couldn't hold the wolf form through agony like that. One moment she was a wolf, the next she was human again, her leg twisted at a wrong angle. Aldrich shifted back too, standing over her in his human form. Blood ran down his body from a dozen small wounds, but he was still standing, still strong. Enough games, he said. He reached down and grabbed her throat, lifting her off the ground. Her feet kicked uselessly in the air. I gave you life. Now I'm taking it back. His grip tightened. Leora's vision started to darken at the edges. She clawed at his hand but might as well have been scratching stone. Father, stop! Marcus's voice, distant and desperate. Stay out of this, boy. You'll destroy everything. The court, the kingdom. If they find out what you did, they won't, because the only witnesses will be dead. Leora's lungs burned. Her heart hammered against her ribs. This was it. She'd fought, she'd tried, but it wasn't enough. It's never enough, she thought dimly. I was never enough. And then something changed. The air in the room shifted, grew heavy with pressure. The temperature dropped so fast that Leora's breath, what little she could draw, fogged in front of her face. Aldrich felt it too. His grip loosened slightly, and his head turned toward the window. The sky outside had gone dark. Not night dark, wrong dark. The kind of darkness that swallowed light instead of being an absence of it. What? Aldrich started to say. The window exploded inward. Shadow poured into the room like liquid, taking shape as it came. Not one shape, dozens of them. Wolves made of darkness and smoke, their eyes burning with the same golden light as Leora's. And leading them, striding through the broken window like she was stepping through a door, was a woman. She was tall, rail-thin, with skin so pale it was almost translucent. Her hair floated around her head like she was underwater. And her eyes were the deepest black Leora had ever seen, without iris or pupil, just endless void. Aldrich Vance, the woman said. Her voice echoed strangely, as if speaking from multiple directions at once. You've broken your contract. Aldrich dropped Leora. She crashed to the floor, gasping for air. Weaver, Aldrich said. His voice tried for authority, but came out shaky. This isn't your concern. The girl is mine to... The girl is mine, the Weaver interrupted. Or had you forgotten? You traded her soul for victory, her life for power, and now you attempt to kill what you've already sold. She's a threat. She is payment. The weaver glided forward. No, not glided. Leora realized with horror that the woman's feet weren't touching the ground. Payment you no longer have the right to destroy. I'm the king! You're a thief! The weaver's hand shot out faster than sight and touched Aldrich's chest. He convulsed, his body arching backward. And thieves must be punished. Whatever she did to him, it wasn't quick. Aldrich screamed, a sound so full of agony that even Leora, who had every reason to hate him, felt a spike of sympathy. His body twisted, bones cracking, skin rippling. "Stop," Leora heard herself say. Her voice was hoarse from almost being strangled, but it carried. "Please, stop." The weaver's void black eyes fixed on her. "You defend him? After everything?" "I don't defend anything, but if you kill him, I'm no better than he is. He tried to murder you." "Yeah, he did." Leora dragged herself to her feet, her broken legs screaming in protest. "But I don't want to win by having someone else fight my battles." The weaver tilted her head, studying Leora like she was something unexpected and possibly interesting. "You spare him? I didn't say that." Leora looked at her father, still suspended by the weaver's power, his face twisted in pain. "I said I don't want him dead, but I do want the truth out. I want everyone to know what he did. The truth will destroy his kingdom." "Good. It deserves to be destroyed." The weaver smiled, and it was like watching a crack form in reality. "Very well. But there is still the matter of my payment." Leora's stomach dropped. "What payment? Your father made a deal. He received victory. But the price was your wolf, and through it, a binding to keep the Alpha King imprisoned and immortal. You've broken that binding, reclaimed what was sold. The deal is void. So, I'm free?" "No." The weaver's smile widened. "You've taken back what was mine. Now you owe me a new deal." "I'm not making deals with—" "You misunderstand. The deal is already made. The moment you reclaimed your wolf, you accepted my terms." The weaver's hand moved in a complex gesture, and symbols appeared in the air, the same symbols that had covered the sealed door in the prison. "You will have your wolf, your power, your freedom. But in return, you will serve as my champion." "Your what?" "Balance must be maintained. Every generation, I choose one to carry my mark, to enforce the old laws when they are broken, to punish those who would steal what is not theirs to take." The weaver's eyes bore into Leora's. "You were broken by theft. Now you will prevent others from being broken the same way. And if I refuse, you can't. The moment you touched your wolf in that chamber, the contract was sealed." The weaver gestured at Leora's left hand. Leora looked down and saw a mark she didn't remember getting. A complex symbol burned into her palm, glowing with faint golden light. "You belong to me now, Leora Vance, just as your father did before you." "That's not fair." "No, it isn't." The weaver released Aldrich, who collapsed to the floor, gasping. "But very little in this world is fair. You, of all people, should understand that." The shadow wolves began to dissipate, flowing back toward the broken window. The weaver turned to follow them. "Wait," Leora said. "What am I supposed to do? How do I—" "You'll know when the time comes. My champions always do." The weaver paused at the window, looking back. "One more thing. Your father's power, the victory I gave him, it came with an expiration date, 23 years, the same age you are now." "What does that mean?" "It means his kingdom has been running on borrowed time, and that time is up." The weaver disappeared through the window, taking the darkness with her. Sunlight flooded back into the room, warm and normal, and completely at odds with what had just happened. For a long moment, nobody moved. Aldrich lay on the floor, breathing hard. Marcus stood frozen in the corner, his face white. Draven had managed to sit up in the bed, though he looked like he might pass out again at any moment. And Iris stood with her back against the wall, her expression somewhere between terror and fascination. "What just happened?" Marcus finally asked. "I think," Draven said slowly, "your sister just became something new." Leora looked at the mark on her palm. It didn't hurt, but it felt present, like a weight she'd be carrying for the rest of her life. "Father," she said, limping over to where Aldrich lay. "Get up." He pushed himself to his knees, his movement sluggish. Whatever the weaver had done to him, it had taken something out of him. He looked older now, diminished. "You're going to tell them," Leora continued. "Everyone, the court, the nobles, the whole kingdom. You're going to explain what you did, the deal you made, why I was born without a wolf." "They'll never believe." "They'll believe." Leora held up her marked hand. "Because I have proof now. And if you try to lie, I'll know. This mark, whatever it is, it shows me truth, shows me theft, shows me lies." She didn't actually know if that was true, but it felt true, and that was close enough. Aldrich's face crumpled. "If I tell them, I'll lose everything, the throne, the kingdom." "You never deserved it in the first place. You stole it, just like you stole my wolf." "I was trying to save our people." "By damning your own daughter?" Leora's voice was cold. "No, you don't get to call that heroism. You made a choice. You put your ambition above everything else, and now you're going to face the consequences." "Leora," Marcus stepped forward. "If Father admits this publicly, the kingdom will tear itself apart. There will be civil war. Thousands will die." "Maybe," Leora said, "or maybe people deserve to know what kind of man they've been following." "And what then? You take the throne? You, who everyone thought was cursed?" "I don't want the throne." The words surprised Leora even as she said them, but they were true. "I never wanted any of this, but I'm not going to let him keep it either." "Then what do you want?" Good question. What did she want? A week ago she would have said she just wanted to survive, to exist without being hated. But that girl was gone, died in the Abyss prison, or was reborn in the Chamber of Golden Light. Now, "I want change," she said finally. "Real change. Not just a new face on the throne, but a different kind of kingdom. One where people aren't judged by whether they have a wolf. Where power isn't everything." "That's impossible," Aldrich said from the floor. "So is escaping the Abyss. So is reclaiming my wolf. So is surviving you." Leora looked at each of them in turn, her broken father, her conflicted brother, the dying king in the bed, the healer who'd kept silent for decades. "I've done a lot of impossible things in the last day. What's one more?" Outside, she could hear voices rising. The guards had finally worked up the courage to check on their king. They'd be here soon, and then what? "We need to move," Draven said, echoing her thoughts. "If you're going to make your stand, it can't be in this tower. Too easy to trap us here." "The throne room," Marcus said suddenly. "If you're going to challenge Father publicly, do it there, where the whole court can witness." "They'll kill her the moment she walks in," Iris pointed out. "Maybe. Or maybe they'll listen." Marcus looked at Leora, and for the first time she saw something like respect in his eyes. "You beat Father. You survived the Weaver. If you walk in there with your head high and your wolf in your eyes, they might actually listen. Or they might tear me apart." "Yeah, that too." Leora laughed despite everything. "You're really selling this plan. I'm being realistic, but it's still your best shot." Footsteps thundered in the hallway outside. The guards were coming. Leora made a decision. "Get him up," she said, pointing at Aldrich. "We're all going to the throne room, together." "I can't," Aldrich started. "You can, and you will. Because if you don't, I'll drag you there myself, and that will look even worse for you." Marcus helped Aldrich to his feet. The king swayed but managed to stay upright. He looked at Leora, and there was something in his expression she'd never seen before. Fear. He was afraid of her. "How's your leg?" Draven asked Leora. She'd almost forgotten about it in the chaos. It still hurt, a deep, grinding pain, but her wolf was already healing it. She could feel the bone knitting back together, faster than any human healing, but not instant. She'd still be limping. "I'll manage," she said. The door burst open and guards poured in, weapons drawn. They stopped when they saw their king standing there, bloodied but alive. "Your Majesty," the captain said, his voice uncertain. "We heard fighting. Are you—" "I'm fine," Aldrich said. His voice was flat, defeated. "Escort us to the throne room. All of us." The captain looked confused but nodded. "As you command." They formed a procession through the castle, Aldrich in front with Leora beside him, Marcus and Draven following, Iris staying behind in the tower. The guards surrounded them, not sure if they were escorting their king or his prisoners. Word spread fast. By the time they reached the main corridors, people were lining the walls, staring. Servants and nobles, soldiers and clerks, all of them drawn by the news that something impossible had happened. Leora kept her head high, though every step sent pain shooting through her leg. She could feel their stares, hear their whispers. That's her. The defective princess. She has wolf eyes now. Is that the Alpha King with her? I heard she broke out of the abyss. Impossible. Look at her, though. The throne room doors were open and the court was already assembled. Someone must have sent word ahead. Every noble family in Duskfall seemed to be present, all dressed in their finest, all staring as Leora limped into the room. Queen Alara sat in her chair beside the empty throne, her face unreadable. When she saw Leora, something flickered in her eyes. Surprise? Hope? Fear? But it was gone before Leora could identify it. Aldrich walked to his throne but didn't sit. Instead, he turned to face the court, with Leora standing beside him. The room fell silent. I have something to confess, Aldrich said. His voice was quiet, but it carried in the stillness. Leora's heart hammered. He was actually going to do it. 23 years ago, I made a deal with a being known as the Weaver. I was losing a war. My kingdom was on the brink of collapse, and I was willing to pay any price to save it. The nobles shifted, murmuring to each other. The price, Aldrich continued, was my daughter's soul. Her wolf, to be specific, taken before she was even born. I condemned her to a life of suffering so that I could have victory. The murmuring grew louder. Some nobles looked shocked. Others looked skeptical. That's absurd, someone called out. The princess was born defective. Everyone knows the lie I told you, Aldrich interrupted. The truth is that I broke her. I stole from her. And then I let you all believe she was cursed, let you treat her as less than human, because it was easier than admitting what I'd done. This is madness, another noble said. Why would you confess this now? Because, Leora said, stepping forward, he doesn't have a choice anymore. She held up her marked hand, and the symbol blazed with golden light. The entire court gasped. The Weaver came back, Leora continued. And she made it very clear that lies have consequences. My father's power, his victory, it was all borrowed time. And that time is up. Prove it, someone demanded. Prove that you're not just making this up. Leora looked at Draven. He was barely standing, leaning heavily on Marcus, but he nodded. I am Draven Kor, he announced, his voice carrying despite his weakness. Former Alpha King of the Northern Territories. Aldrich didn't just defeat me. He trapped me in the Abyss prison for 3 years, kept alive by the same curse that stole this girl's wolf. We were bound together, her suffering sustaining my torment. The court erupted. The Alpha King is dead. This is a trick. How is this possible? The princess has wolf eyes. Look at the mark on her hand. This can't be real. Queen Alara stood suddenly, silencing the room with the gesture. She descended from her platform and walked toward Leora, her face still unreadable. When she reached her daughter, she stopped. For a long moment, mother and daughter just stared at each other. Then Alara spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. I knew. The room went silent again. I knew what your father had done. I felt it when you were born, felt the emptiness where your wolf should have been, and I said nothing. Tears spilled down Alara's face, the first emotion Leora had ever seen from her. I was afraid of what it meant. Afraid of what Aldrich had become, so I pretended you were the problem, made myself believe you were born wrong, because it was easier than accepting that I'd married a monster. Mother, Leora started, but she didn't know how to finish. I don't expect forgiveness, Alara continued. I don't deserve it, but I want you to know every time I looked away, every time I pretended you didn't exist, it wasn't because I didn't love you. It was because I loved you too much to face what loving you meant. It wasn't an excuse. It wasn't enough. But it was more than Leora had ever gotten from her before. The kingdom needs a new ruler, Alara said, turning to address the court. One who wasn't built on lies and stolen power. One who understands what it means to suffer, to be broken, to survive anyway. You can't be suggesting, someone sputtered. I'm not suggesting, I'm demanding. Alara's voice was steel now. My daughter has more right to that throne than anyone in this room, and if you can't see that, then you're as blind as I've been. The court dissolved into chaos. Half the nobles were shouting in agreement, the other half in protest. Guards looked to their captain for orders. The captain looked at Aldrich, who just stood there, defeated. And Leora stood in the center of it all, with her golden eyes and her marked hand and her half-healed leg, and thought, this is just the beginning. She didn't know what came next. Didn't know if she'd survive the next hour, much less build the kingdom she'd imagined. But for the first time in her life, she wasn't afraid of the future, because whatever came, she'd face it as herself, whole, unbroken. And that was enough. The chaos in the throne room showed no signs of stopping. Nobles shouted over each other, guards shifted nervously with hands on their weapons, and somewhere in the back, someone was calling for Aldrich's immediate execution. Leora stood in the center of it all and felt something shift inside her, not her wolf. That was already part of her now, settled and sure. This was something else, a clarity that cut through the noise like a blade through silk. Enough, she said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried. The mark on her palm flared with golden light, and suddenly every person in the room felt it, a pressure in the air, a weight that demanded attention. The shouting stopped. You want proof? Leora looked around at the assembled nobles, at their painted faces and expensive clothes, and carefully maintained expressions. Fine, I'll give you proof. She walked, limped really, her legs still healing, toward the nearest noble. Lord Brennan, a man who'd once told her to her face that she should have been drowned at birth. You, she said, stopping in front of him. Tell me the truth. Do you believe what my father just confessed? Lord Brennan opened his mouth, probably to lie, but the words that came out weren't his. Yes, I always suspected something was wrong with the bonding ceremony. No child fails 3 times naturally. He looked shocked at his own words, his hand flying to his mouth. Leora moved to the next noble. Lady Serena, who'd once suggested Leora be locked away for everyone's safety. And you? Do you believe him? I don't want to, Lady Serena said, and Leora could see her fighting against the compulsion to speak truth. But yes, it makes too much sense. The timing of his victory, the princess's condition, the way he's ruled these past decades, always paranoid, always afraid someone would discover something. Leora went through the crowd like that, asking the same question, forcing truth from lips that had spent years speaking carefully crafted lies. By the time she'd questioned a dozen nobles, the pattern was clear. They'd all suspected something. They'd all known, on some level, that Aldrich's perfect victory had come at a terrible price. But they'd chosen not to look too closely because it benefited them to have a strong king. Because questioning him would have been dangerous. Because it was easier to blame a child than confront uncomfortable truths. The mark the Weaver gave me, Leora said, addressing the whole room now. It does more than just prove my father's crimes. It shows truth, reveals theft, and I can feel the weight of stolen things in this room like a physical presence. She turned slowly, and her enhanced senses picked up dozens of small deceits. A noble wearing his dead brother's ring after murdering him for the inheritance. Another who'd forged documents to steal land from a rival family. A court advisor who'd been selling secrets to neighboring kingdoms. This kingdom was built on lies, Leora continued. My father's lies, your lies. Lies that everyone agreed to believe because the truth was too uncomfortable. She looked at Aldrich, who still stood by his throne, diminished and silent. But I'm done with lies. And I'm done with a system that rewards theft and punishes honesty. What are you proposing? Asked Lord Kane, one of the older nobles. His voice was cautious but not hostile. That we tear down everything, start from nothing. No, I'm proposing we do something harder. We fix what's broken while keeping what works. Leora turned to face the throne, that massive seat of power that had corrupted her father so completely. But first, we deal with him. Aldrich finally looked up, meeting her eyes. Are you going to kill me? No. Why not? I deserve it. Probably. But killing you would make you a martyr. Some people would say I seized power through violence. That I was just another power-hungry monster. Leora shook her head. No, you're going to live. You're going to step down from the throne publicly, and you're going to spend the rest of your life working to repair the damage you've done. That's not a punishment, someone shouted. That's mercy he doesn't deserve. It's worse than death, Draven said from where he leaned against Marcus. Trust me. Living with what you've done, watching someone else fix your mistakes, That's a special kind of hell. Aldrich's face crumpled, and for the first time Leora saw real remorse there. Not self-pity, not fear of consequences, actual understanding of what he'd done to her, to Draven, to the kingdom. I accept your terms, Aldrich said quietly. I'm not done. Leora's voice was hard. You'll also work with Iris to document every deal the Weaver made with humans over the past century. Every stolen soul, every cursed child, every price paid for power. And we're going to find them. Help them if we can. That could take years. Then you'd better get started. Aldrich nodded slowly. He reached up and removed his crown, that heavy circle of gold and jewels that had defined him for decades. He held it for a moment and then set it on the throne. The crown is yours, he said to Leora, if you'll take it. Leora stared at the crown. A week ago, she would have said she didn't want it, that she'd never wanted power or position or any of the things that came with being royalty. But that was before. Before she'd survived the abyss, before she'd reclaimed her wolf, before she'd understood that power wasn't the problem, how you used it was. I'll take it, she said, but not like this. She walked to the throne, picked up the crown, and threw it out the open window. The court gasped. That crown represented everything wrong with this kingdom, Leora said as the gasps turned to shocked murmurs. Power bought with stolen souls, authority maintained through fear, strength without wisdom. She turned back to face them. If I'm going to rule, it won't be with symbols of the past. It'll be as something new. You can't just throw away the crown, someone protested. It's been in the royal family for generations of tyrants and thieves, Leora interrupted. Yeah, I know the history. I had to study it while you all pretended I didn't exist. And every king who wore that crown made compromises, sacrificed people, chose power over principles. She pointed at the empty space where the crown had been. That ends now. So what? Lord Brennan asked, his voice sharp with skepticism. You're going to rule with no symbols? No authority? Just your word? I'm going to rule with this. Leora held up her marked hand. The Weaver made me her champion. That means enforcing the old laws. Real laws, not the ones kings made up to suit themselves. It means protecting people from being stolen from, used, discarded. She looked around the room. And yes, that includes protecting people from me, because this mark doesn't just show me others' lies. It holds me accountable too. If I steal, if I take what isn't freely given, if I abuse the power I've been granted, you'll know. Everyone will know. That's insane, Lady Serena said. No ruler can operate like that. You need the freedom to make hard choices, to do necessary evils. Maybe. Or maybe that's just what every tyrant tells themselves to justify their cruelty. Leora walked down from the throne platform, moving among the nobles. I don't have all the answers, but I know this. The old way doesn't work. Not for people like me. Not for anyone who doesn't fit the perfect mold of what this kingdom thinks a person should be. She stopped in front of a young woman she recognized, Clara, a servant girl who worked in the kitchens. She'd never had a wolf either, had been relegated to the lowest positions because of it. You, Leora said. What's your name? Clara, Your Highness. The girl looked terrified. Don't call me that, not yet. Leora held out her hand. Do you have a wolf, Clara? No, my lady. I'm sorry, Don't apologize for what you are. Do you know why you don't have one? Clara shook her head, tears streaming down her face. Leora placed her marked hand on Clara's shoulder, and immediately she felt it. The same emptiness that had defined her own life. But different. This wasn't a theft. This was something else. You were born early, Leora said, the knowledge flowing through her mark somehow. The bonding ceremony requires 7 days. You were born in the middle of a battle, and your parents were killed before the 7th day came. No one performed the ritual because no one was left alive who knew you existed. Clara's eyes went wide. How did you? The mark shows me truth. And the truth is, you're not defective. You're not cursed. You just never got what should have been yours from the start. Leora looked up at the assembled court. How many others are there like her? Like me? People whose lives were destroyed not because they were broken, but because someone took from them? Or because no one helped when they needed it? Silence. Uncomfortable, guilty silence. This is what changes, Leora continued. We find everyone who should have bonded but didn't. We figure out why. And if their wolf was stolen, we get it back. If the ceremony was interrupted, we perform it again. If they truly can't bond, and I suspect that's rarer than we've been told, we treat them like people anyway. The resources that would require, Lord Kane started, are worth it because people are worth it. Leora's voice was firm. Or they should be, in any kingdom worth ruling. Movement at the edge of the crowd caught her attention. Marcus was helping Draven to a chair, and the former Alpha King looked seconds from passing out again. Leora had been so focused on the court that she'd forgotten his wounds. We need to continue this later, she said. But first, Lord Brennan, you have healers in your household, correct? Yes, 3 of them. Send them to help King Draven. Lady Serena, you have connections with the merchant guilds. I need food and medical supplies brought to the East Tower where Iris is staying. She's going to need them to treat everyone we find who needs healing. She went through the nobles one by one, assigning tasks. Some protested. Most obeyed, too shocked by the rapid changes to mount real resistance. When she was done, she turned to Marcus. You, come with me. They left the throne room together, Leora, Marcus, Draven, being carried by guards, and Alara following silently behind. They made their way back to Iris's tower, where the healer immediately started fussing over Draven's reopened wounds. You should be resting, not making grand pronouncements in throne rooms, Iris scolded. She needed me, Draven said, his voice weak, to prove she wasn't lying about who I was. And now you're bleeding again. Congratulations. While Iris worked, Leora stood by the window looking out over the castle grounds. The courtyard below was full of people. Servants, soldiers, merchants who'd heard what happened and come to see if it was true. You handled that well, Marcus said quietly, coming to stand beside her. Better than Father ever could have. I threw away the crown and made promises I don't know if I can keep. Like I said, better than Father. Leora almost smiled. What about you? Are you angry I didn't offer you the throne? No. Marcus's answer came quickly, firmly. I never wanted it. I spent my whole life watching what it did to Father, how it twisted him, made him paranoid and cruel. I'm relieved someone else is taking that burden. It doesn't have to be a burden, Leora said. Or at least, not just a burden. It could be, I don't know, a responsibility, a privilege? That's naive. Maybe. But I'd rather be naive than cynical. They stood in silence for a moment, watching the crowd below grow larger. They're waiting for you, Marcus said eventually, waiting to see what kind of ruler you'll be. I don't know what kind of ruler I'll be. I'm figuring this out as I go. That makes 2 of us. But for what it's worth, Marcus turned to look at her directly. I think you'll be extraordinary, not because you're perfect, but because you know what it's like to be broken, and that might be more valuable than any crown. From the bed, Draven made a sound that might have been agreement or might have just been pain. It was hard to tell. He's right, Draven said after Iris finished wrapping his wounds again. The best rulers are the ones who remember what it was like to have nothing, to be nothing. Is that why you were a good king? Leora asked. I wasn't. I was arrogant and aggressive, and I started wars I couldn't finish. Draven's golden eyes met hers, but I would have been better if I'd spent 3 years in a hole learning humility. That's one way to look at torture and imprisonment. You find wisdom where you can. Alara cleared her throat from where she'd been sitting quietly in the corner. May I speak with you, Leora? Alone? Leora tensed. She wasn't ready for this conversation, wasn't sure she'd ever be ready, but avoiding it wouldn't make it easier. Fine, she said. They went out onto the tower's balcony, where the wind whipped Leora's ruined dress around her legs and tugged at Alara's perfect hair. For a long moment, neither spoke. I don't know how to be your mother, Alara finally said. I never did. From the moment you were born and the bonding failed, I was afraid of you. Afraid of what it meant that my daughter was hollow. Afraid that it was somehow my fault. It wasn't your fault, it was Father's. I know that now, but back then... Alara's voice broke. Back then, I just saw this tiny, helpless thing, and all I could feel was dread. And that dread turned to distance, and distance turned to neglect. And I told myself it was for your own good, that you were better off without a mother who couldn't look at you without remembering her own failure. That's a lot of justifications for abandoning your child. It is. And none of them are good enough. Alara turned to look at her. I can't take back the 23 years I wasted, can't unmake the choices I made. But I want you to know, what I said in the throne room was true. Every time I looked away from you, it was because I loved you too much to face what loving you required. Leora wanted to be angry. Part of her was angry. But another part, the part that had just reclaimed her wolf, that had survived the abyss, that had stood up to her father and the Weaver and the entire corrupt court, that part understood. Love didn't fix everything. Sometimes it made things worse. Sometimes the people who hurt you most were the ones who cared, who were just too broken themselves to know how to show it right. I don't forgive you, Leora said. Not yet. Maybe not ever. I don't expect you to. But, Leora took a breath. But I'm willing to try. To see if we can build something new. Not mother and daughter, not the way it should have been. But something. Maybe just two people who share blood and regrets and a really messed up family. Alara's smile was sad but genuine. I'd like that. They stood together on the balcony, not touching, not quite comfortable, but present. And for now, that was enough. The next few weeks were chaos. Controlled chaos, but chaos nonetheless. Leora threw herself into the work of rebuilding and quickly discovered that running a kingdom was nothing like the books made it seem. There were 1,000 small decisions to make every day. Trade agreements, legal disputes, infrastructure repairs. And that was on top of the larger project of finding everyone who'd been robbed of their wolves. She set up a registry in the castle courtyard, inviting anyone who'd failed their bonding ceremony to come forward. The response was overwhelming. Hundreds of people showed up, servants, farmers, merchants, even a few minor nobles, all of them carrying the same shame Leora had carried her entire life. One by one, she used her mark to determine what had happened. Some, like Clara, had simply been victims of circumstance. Others had been deliberately targeted, children of families that fell out of political favor, or who possessed land someone else wanted. A few had actually been born unable to bond, but those were rare. Far rarer than the lies had suggested. For those who'd been stolen from, the process of reclaiming their wolves was complicated. It required finding the source of the theft, tracking down the contract, breaking the binding. The Weaver helped, appearing sporadically to undo what she'd done at others' requests. But even with her help, it was slow work. Draven recovered slowly. The healers said he'd never be as strong as he was before the imprisonment, but he'd live. He spent most of his time helping Leora navigate the political complexities of dealing with the nobles, teaching her which ones could be trusted and which needed to be watched. You're building something unprecedented, he told her one evening as they reviewed reports in what used to be Aldrich's private study. A kingdom where power comes from service instead of fear, where rulers are held accountable instead of worshipped. I'm trying to, Leora corrected. Whether I succeed is another question. You will, not because you're perfect, but because you care, and that matters more than most people realize. Marcus proved surprisingly helpful. He knew the court intimately, knew all the secret alliances and hidden grudges that shaped decisions. He became Leora's advisor, helping her navigate treacherous political waters while learning to operate in a system that valued honesty over manipulation. Aldrich, true to his word, withdrew from public life. He spent his days working with Iris, documenting the Weaver's contracts and helping find the people who'd been affected. He looked older now, diminished, but also, strangely, more at peace, as if setting down the burden of power had freed him from something. 6 months after Leora's return from the abyss, she stood in the throne room again. But this time, it was different. She'd had the throne itself removed, replaced with a simple chair. The walls had been painted with murals depicting not kings and conquests, but ordinary people doing ordinary work. The message was clear. This wasn't a room for rulers to lord over subjects. It was a space where people came together to solve problems. The court had assembled for her formal coronation, but there was no crown waiting. Instead, Leora wore a circlet of plain silver engraved with the symbol from her mark. Simple, honest, true to what she was building. You ready for this? Draven asked. He stood beside her, his role officially royal advisor, but unofficially much more. They'd grown close over the months, bonded by shared trauma and the work of rebuilding. No, Leora admitted. But I don't think anyone's ever ready for this. Probably not. But you'll figure it out. You always do. Alara performed the ceremony, not a traditional coronation with priests and ancient rites, but something new. She spoke of responsibility and service, of learning from mistakes and choosing truth over comfort. And when she placed the circlet on Leora's head, it felt right in a way the old crown never could have. "People of Duskfall," Leora said, addressing the assembled court and the citizens who'd been allowed in to witness. "I won't promise you I'll be a perfect queen. I'll make mistakes. I'll struggle. I'll probably fail more times than I succeed." She paused. "But I promise you this. I will never lie to you. I will never take from you what isn't freely given. And I will work every day to build a kingdom where everyone has worth, whether they have a wolf or not. Whether they're powerful or powerless. Whether they fit the mold or break it completely." The crowd was silent for a moment. Then someone in the back started clapping. Then another. Then more. Until the whole room was filled with applause. It wasn't universal. Some nobles still looked skeptical. Some people still doubted her. That was fine. She didn't need everyone to believe in her vision immediately. She just needed enough people to give it a chance. That night, Leora stood alone on the castle's highest tower, looking out over the kingdom. The mark on her palm glowed faintly in the darkness, a reminder of what she'd become and what she'd promised to be. She thought about the girl she'd been just months ago, the hollow girl, the defect, the princess who was supposed to die quietly in the abyss. That girl was gone, but not dead, just transformed, changed by pain and survival, and the choice to keep fighting even when everything said she should give up. "You know," Draven's voice came from behind her, "most queens don't spend their coronation night standing alone on towers." "I'm not most queens." "No, you're really not." He came to stand beside her. "What are you thinking about?" "Everything, nothing. How strange it is that my worst day became the beginning of my best ones. Life's funny that way. The things that break us sometimes make us stronger. Not because breaking is good, but because surviving it teaches us things we couldn't have learned any other way." Leora looked at him, this man who'd been her enemy's enemy, who'd become her ally and friend, who understood what it meant to lose everything and find a way to keep going. "Thank you," she said, "for not giving up. When you were in that prison, when I was being dragged through the streets, we both could have given up. Should have, probably. But we didn't." "No, we didn't." Draven's hand found hers, his fingers warm against her palm where the mark glowed. "And look what we built because of it." They stood together in the darkness, two people who'd been broken and stolen from, who'd found each other in the deepest hole in the kingdom and climbed out together, who'd taken their pain and turned it into something better. Leora knew there would be challenges ahead. Nobles who resisted change, neighboring kingdoms who saw her reforms as weakness, the slow, grinding work of building a better world from the ruins of a corrupt one. But for the first time in her life, she wasn't afraid of the future. Because she'd learned something in that abyss, something the cold and darkness and near death couldn't take from her. She was not hollow. She never had been. She was just a person who'd had something stolen from her. And instead of letting that theft define her, she'd chosen to reclaim what was hers and use it to make sure no one else had to suffer the same way. That wasn't weakness. That wasn't being broken. That was strength. Real strength. The kind that lasted. The kind that changed things. And as Leora stood on that tower with her hand in Draven's and her mark glowing in the darkness and her kingdom spread out below her full of people who were starting to believe in a different kind of future, she finally understood what it meant to be whole. Not perfect. Not without scars or pain or the weight of everything she'd endured, but whole. Complete. Herself. And that, she thought, was worth more than any crown.